Kumar, welcome to the studio. Are we
Thank you kindly,
recording?
good sir. Yeah, it says recording.
Cool. Welcome back to Canada.
Thank you kindly. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's good to be back.
Good.
Yeah.
How was Mexico?
This was the first chapter, or call it the first, maybe not even first chapter, maybe the first epilogue,
Yeah.
I think, or the epilogue rather, of what I know will become a book that I'll be able to write eventually, and one
Yeah.
that has me hella excited.
So for those that don't know, you're moving to Mexico
I am indeed, yeah.
and you're making it a permanent move, semi-permanent, a trial run. What's the
I feel like this will be it will very much be a permanent move, but not permanent in my location.
Okay.
What I mean by this is I am creating the optionality behind Mexico, and I've been working really hard towards piecing it all together
Yeah.
and navigating as I was explaining to you a little bit earlier, just navigating the immigration process, making sure that I have all my T's crossed, all my I's dotted
Yeah.
before I get there from a legality perspective. I just want to do all this above board as well as I can.
Of course.
I've already bought property out there, so that was something that also,
Congrats.
thank you kindly, was certainly not something that I was expecting to
No.
do. You and I have kind of spoken about this for a
Yes.
while, but you know the speed at which it ended
Of
up
course.
landing.
Yeah.
And it almost caught me off guard, let alone some of the other people that I've been speaking to who've said, holy shit, what are you talking about? You bought property in Mexico. How did that end up happening?
There's lots of people curious about that. I get a lot of questions. A lot of people
Yeah.
are talking about buying in a warmer climate for the winter. So, I mean, as many details as you can share, I think the listeners will appreciate it.
Like anywhere else, there are stipulations in terms of where you can own, what kind of property you can own. But like a lot of what I think we see here, you can get around it to some extent legally
Yeah.
by building trusts and navigating the financial system and piecing together, or not piecing together rather, but putting in place financial products that we have the options for here as well. But
Yeah.
over there, they just work a little bit more in our favor because we're outside of the tax loopholes,
Okay.
if you will, or not the loopholes, but rather the tax system.
Yes.
Similar. So when we look at our brothers and sisters down south in the U.S., once you're a green card holder, you are a part of that tax system.
Okay.
But you can be a foreign national within Mexico and avoid a lot of that and shelter yourself from some of the tax implications that may arise from you owning property.
Is that the setup you have right now?
Yes and no. And mine's not completed yet. I'm still in the process of trying to figure out exactly what would make the most sense, why, how to piece it together. And specifically for my purposes, do I even really need to think about it? It might be premature for me to try to piece it together. I think for an entrepreneur who might be going out there on a more permanent basis with their business, for example, so if you were to bring the real estate business into Mexico
Yeah.
and you were to start just running with it, right? And you were to leave some of what you're doing here in Canada behind,
Yes.
that would create a very different implication, a very different scenario for you
course.
than it would for myself.
Okay.
And so for me, the implications that I face are more navigating the Canadian system in terms of right now, the bank that I'm with, how do I move that equities portfolio over to, for example, a Mexican institution if I
Yeah.
decide, or do I liquidate the entirety of that portfolio and all three of those portfolios and move them into a U.S. institution just to give myself some of that optionality?
Is that what most people do?
I can't speak for most people. For my purposes, when I look at my time horizon is long enough that I can justify moving it into a U.S. institution.
Yeah.
And banking off of, and I have colleagues and I have a network specifically within Florida, which that's another, another conversation that we need to have. But the network within Florida, I feel much more confident, especially now what we've seen happen.
Yes.
With the liberals freezing bank accounts and things. Just
Scary stuff.
it's scary, yes, more so frustrating. And
Well-
the reason,
We'll get into that.
yeah,
But I want to keep this conversation
sure,
compartmentalize
okay,
just so we can cover the Mexico stuff first,
yeah.
and then we'll move on to all that
Sure.
stuff. Don't worry. We'll get to
So
that
I'll have a
stuff.
chance to voice that. Huh? So
100%.
yeah, so coming back to Mexico, it was born out of an idea of me wanting to introduce, I used the word optionality earlier. I wanted to introduce optionality into my financial
Yes.
foundation. And in my mind, I'm saying in 2020, or I think pre-2020, we had $100 billion of Canadian currency in circulation.
Yes.
Our M2 money supply was $100 billion.
Yes.
Now it's $500 billion.
Yes.
We'll have to check those numbers to make sure that they're actually accurate. But my understanding is that we have printed the government has printed 5x our money
Yes.
supply. The only way to curb that is upping rates.
That's right.
Part of why, I opted to have you help me in selling the primary residence was specifically because I wanted to, I stood to lose the most from that asset and gain the most from
Yes.
that asset. But I also wanted to preserve as much of it as I possibly could.
100%.
So now coming back to Mexico, the idea is rip that fiat out of the Canadian economy
Yes.
and buy this property, this condo in Mexico, where now I've introduced a new set of optionality into my life, which is specifically with currency. So now if
Yes.
I ever need to sell that asset, I'm not selling it for Canadian dollars. I'm selling it for either Mexican pesos or for US dollars, both currencies of which I see a little bit more flexibility than I see with the Canadian dollar.
So when you're in Mexico and you're buying a property as somebody who's newer to the country, do they have traditional mortgages? How does that work?
No. So as foreign nationals, we don't have the option to
Okay.
go through traditional lending, at least not traditional lending the way that we've come to understand it.
Yeah.
When you think of an A lender or even a B lender for that matter,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have that option. There are creative lenders, and I'm using air quotes
Yes.
for people who are listening. The creative lenders I am very, very wary of. And part
Okay.
of why is this is not a market that I'm familiar with.
Yes.
It's not a market that I was
It's
familiar
new.
with going into it. Yeah, it was just something that I had to navigate it, in a new kind of way across the board, from a financing perspective, from a due diligence perspective, and just in terms of making sure that I'm working with a builder that I trust.
Residency.
Yeah,
all
the
that
residency,
stuff.
the area, what are the political implications of that particular area? What's the outlook for that area? Is it on the up? Is it on the down? What's going to impact it? Is there a chance a hurricane could come through
Yeah.
and rip that place up?
You got to look at
all
all
of
that
these things.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, out here, when we think about specifically here in Canada, our infrastructure is built in such a way that we can handle a storm,
Yes.
a snowstorm. Is the place that you're going to buy in Mexico set up where it can handle a hurricane? There's places like Cozumel, for example, that get absolutely hammered. And
That's the island.
it's an island
Yeah.
just a little bit out. I think it's like an hour and a half of a ferry away from Playa del Carmen. Playa del Carmen is where I bought, 45 minutes south of Cancun.
Okay.
It's awesome because if you go to certain coasts, you can actually see Cozumel out in the distance, and you see big ferries come through, and or sorry, not big ferries, cruise ships come through. You do see the ferries going regularly.
It's all called Yucatan.
Yeah, so that's in the Yucatan Peninsula.
Okay.
Beautiful
Very
area.
popular for tourists and
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that in my mind, when I think of tourists, and this is, I think, partially just in the ignorance of what we learn here in North America. I think you and I have discussed this as
Yeah.
well, but what are we taught here in North America? We're taught get the best education you can, land the highest paying job,
Yeah.
buy the most expensive things. But out there, you see a very, very different set of philosophies come through, not just from the likes of North America, our
Yeah.
brothers and sisters from Canada, from US,
yeah.
but you see people from all over South America come out to that particular area, that region. And I've had the opportunity, the luxury, and the privilege of speaking to a bunch of them. And it's a blessing to hear how differently they value their time. And that was something, the reason that I bring this up is because
Yeah.
that was something that translated in a very, very material, or not material rather, but in a very impactful and in a way that resonated with me very deeply.
Okay.
Because they don't look at this as a quote unquote vacation. They look at this as I'm living my life. I want to go enjoy and learn from some of the people that are around me.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's necessarily their philosophy, but just given the conversation that I was lucky enough to have with them, that was the vibe I got.
And those are people that are traveling from other countries, from
Yeah.
South American countries.
Yeah, you see people from Peru, you see people from Colombia, you see people from even other parts. Forget actually, back up for a second. Forget the other countries. You see people coming. Mexico's a huge country.
Of course.
It didn't occur to me until I actually saw. I spent a little bit of time in Mexico City, so I've frequented Mexico a handful of times.
Population is 100 million.
It's huge,
Yeah.
but it's nuts because I was thinking to myself in my own ignorance. I was thinking, hey, I'll drive out to Mexico City. I haven't been for a while. It was like a 22-hour drive from where I was, and I thought to myself, how could that's so goofy for me to have thought that this was going to be like a 4 or 5 hour drive.
Yeah.
And that to an easy drive. It just didn't make any sense. I laughed at myself
That's huge.
for thinking about it, but it's a huge country,
Yes.
massive country.
Definitely.
Lots of different cultures, lots of different vibes when you go from place to place.
I have other friends that have moved to Mexico recently, and I have to say it's a shame that I'm seeing so many Canadians leave our country, but I totally understand, and I feel the same way,
Yeah.
to be quite honest.
Yeah.
So let's get into that right now.
Sure.
What prompted this move?
To put this in a nutshell, our country's moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Period. And I would say the exact same thing if we were dealing with a political environment that was leaning way, way, way too right.
Yes.
But that's not the case.
No.
And as many, in as many ways and as many times and as loudly as they'd like, if the left want to sit here and say the extreme right did this and they want to point fingers,
Yeah.
they're wrong.
Yeah, they're wrong.
They're just flat out blatantly wrong. And it's unfortunate on a number of levels, but the part that is most heart-wrenching for me is seeing, so I've been ostracized by my own family. I'm not vaccinated. I'm never going to get that poison. It's not something that I'm just sitting here taking a principled stand on because of what I believe.
Yeah.
I'm taking a principled stand because I refuse to shorten my life expectancy willingly.
Yeah.
Right? There's enough things in this world that can kill me.
We don't have enough data on it.
Yeah, it's not even just that. It's the data that we do have has given me more conviction than I had even before.
Yeah.
To feel very confident in the decision that I've made. And I would never ostracize somebody for getting it. I'm not going to point fingers and call them an idiot or this or that, but...
And most of our listeners will know I'm not vaccinated either. And it's been tough, like for the past 2 years, just to get like shunned from society. Like you can't participate. You can't go to the hockey game. You can't go to the restaurant. You can't take the train. You can't take the plane. And I can't really leave the country right now. Because if I come back, I'm forced to isolate for two weeks. So yeah, I totally get it, man. It's been a rough go here. How are things in Mexico in regards to
night and day?
So it's
Night and day.
non-existent.
There's places I wouldn't go so far as to say it's non-existent because there are still remnants of it, and there still are certain areas. And when I say areas, I can't speak to the geographical area. I'm talking the areas in terms of the there's certain parts that, for example, are a tourist attraction for a certain demographic or for a certain region. And in an attempt to appeal to those visitors, some of those places are masking up. Some of those places are putting certain signs on the door. This is in the rudimentary
they did that
sort
on
of
cruise ships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you see it all kind of take place after the fact, or not take place rather after the fact, but you see the behind the scenes after the fact, and you come to realize they don't give a shit about any of this.
No.
And when I say they, I'm not just referencing Mexicans. I'm referencing the people who are there working in those industries, working specifically in the tourism industry.
Yeah.
They don't give a fuck about this, man. Like as far as they're concerned, they're saying
They're not worried about it.
We want to maintain our industry as well as we possibly can. We want to continue building on it, and we want to build a future. They're not any different than any of us.
Yes.
But I say all of this now, coming back to what I started this with, the part that I find most heart-wrenching, the part that I find most difficult to digest, is the wedge that's been driven between people. I used to look to our American friends, our American cousins. I used to look at them and say, what the hell are you guys doing?
Yeah.
You have this beautiful country. You have this undeniably incredible history. Yet you are the most segregated and divisive society I've ever seen in my life. And now I look around and I say, it was never that bad in my mind down there as it is now here. And that's the part that gets me the most, is that I'm looking around and I'm saying, Canadians, this is not what Canada was for me.
It wasn't like this 4 years ago.
It wasn't like this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It started 2 years ago, and it ramped up so quick.
It doesn't help when the leader of our country calls 25% of our population
Racists, terrorists,
and misogynist.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's when he said that, I was floored. I was angry, really shocked, sad also.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I don't want Justin to succeed. I want him to do good for the country. But now it's like, how could I continue to support him after he's gone and he's driven a wedge right in the middle of the society? Because I know some of my friends might be shocked by this, but I voted for him in the past.
Right.
2015.
As did I.
Yeah. And
I'm more than happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, as did I.
And I'm not opposed to voting Liberal in the future, but it won't be anytime soon.
Yeah, it's not going to be in their current state.
As long as that guy's still with the party, it's just, I can't support it.
Here's the thing, though. It's not just him.
Yeah.
This is where I think the biggest piece of this problem kind of comes from, is that it's not just him. I look at this and I say, Ford, Freeland, Singh, Watson, our very own Watson, and Trudeau should all be tried for treason as far as I'm concerned. And I feel very strongly about that.
Well, we've got certain laws in our country that are there to protect our freedoms, like the Charter of Rights and paragraph number 2 and paragraph number 3, the right of association and the right of freedom of movement. have been totally just
Oh,
ignored.
he turned it into toilet paper.
Yeah.
Is what he did.
And there's a Supreme Court case that'll be coming up on September 23rd or 29th.
I think is it not 19th? I thought it was a little bit sooner.
So it's sometime mid to late September. Brian Peckford, one
Yeah.
of the old guard.
Yeah.
He's the last
Signatory, huh?
last signatory of the Charter of Rights. He's brought a court case against Trudeau for this, this injustice.
Right.
Let's call it what it is, right? And it'll be interesting to see what the court does.
Well,
But
I mean, if they're also
appointed by
yeah,
Trudeau.
if they're libtards themselves, this isn't changing. The part that got me, you cited when he went so far as to call, I don't know what percentage of our population, when he went so far as to call all of them several names. I remember thinking to myself, I said, so my family is East Indian. I've been called a terrorist twice in my life. The first time was I was in grade 9. Right after 9/11. I was called a terrorist in high school. I didn't know how to process that at the time, and I think part of it is because of my age. I didn't quite have the agency to process that. It felt so out of place because
Was it another
hurt.
student?
Yeah. One of the teachers actually agreed with him, which was nuts. That blew my mind. I only kind of digested that, in months following, but even now thinking about it years back, it's just, holy shit, I can't believe that happened.
2001?
Something like that. Yeah.
Would have been after.
It would have been. I don't remember when I processed it, but yeah,
Yeah,
it would have happened right
after 9/11.
Right after 9/11. Yeah. Actually, it was. I shouldn't even say right after. It happened the day of.
Oh yeah.
We were in geography class. I still remember it. Mr. Scott was my teacher. It was literally geography class, and we were talking about different trade agreements between different nations and things like that, and how those impact the migration patterns of people going from one nation to another and around the world and stuff. And they called us into the atrium of the high school, and we ended up seeing it on these screens, and it didn't feel real. Yeah. But I digress. That was the first time that I was called a terrorist. The second time in my life that I've been called a terrorist was by the prime minister of the country with which I've spent the entirety of my life. I've lived here. I've grown up here. I know this place well. I've traveled throughout our nation. I've loved our nation. I love our people. I've done nothing but love our country. And here we have this piece of shit trust fund child who wants to tell me that I'm a terrorist, who wants to call me a racist, who wants to call me a misogynist. Are you out of your fucking mind?
It's unbelievable.
Like, it shocks me, man.
Yeah.
What the liberals once stood for, I used to sell, like what you were just mentioning. I've voted liberal before. What the liberals used to stand for in my mind was peace, equality, a collective good. That's what I used to see the liberals as. Yeah. And now they're everything but. I've never felt such a level of political disappointment.
I still lean left on a lot of these philosophies, right? Liberty of choice. I mean, I think that's fine, but I can't support it.
In its current state, no.
No.
And that's the most unfortunate.
Crazy.
That's the most unfortunate part, is that there's so much built around the philosophy of liberalism that should be celebrated. That should be
100%
in the mind of even every right-leaning individual, only for the purpose of helping them better their own party, better their own, political ideologies. But you look at it now and you're like, this woke shit needs to go.
Yes.
It's responsible, and this is why I celebrate Ron DeSantis as the governor of Florida. I celebrate what he says, where he says Florida is the place that wokeism goes to die. I heard him say that, and I wanted to hug the guy.
They wanted, the people that were pushing this COVID narrative, they wanted Florida to fail. They wanted Florida to have huge cases of COVID. They had lots of cases of COVID, but when it came to death rates, it was nothing different in California.
They celebrated one of their greatest surpluses in history.
Yeah.
Recently, and it's because all these new tax dollars are flowing into the state. Where do you think they're coming from? They're coming from these shithole dem cities that have been mismanaged so poorly for so long.
California is losing residents.
Yeah, left and right.
For its first time in its history, right? They're moving to Texas. They're moving to Florida. So, I mean, capitalism is working its magic, right? People are voting not only on the ballot, but they're voting with their feet.
And their wallets.
Yes.
and
and
their wallets.
You're doing that right now. Like I said, I've known of other families. I won't mention their names on this podcast, but they're leaving our country, and they're leaving with their tax dollars. This is not good.
No.
It's not. And I mean, you're a productive person. We'll talk about some investing stuff that you've done later on. This other family is very, very productive. I've known this other, not a family, but a single person. Like, they're contributing members of society. They're leaving, and it's not good, because what are we going to be left with after, right? If all the people that are productive are leaving, then we're going to be in trouble.
Thinking out loud, I wonder if this only furthers the necessity for socialists to continue pushing that narrative.
Well, socialism, it only, I mean, it's never worked.
No,
It's
you can
never
look. You can
worked.
look back at communism in any place you want.
We
and you'll
can
see it.
look at the Soviet Union. I think it's 60 million deaths under that regime,
Yep.
and then in China, over 100 million deaths. And they're not doing so hot right now either, right? So I can't see a place where communism has ever worked, and capitalism has provided the most powerful nations on the planet, and they've provided the happiest level of enjoyment for its citizens, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, I think we should be leaning towards that way versus then leaning towards a system that has caused so many death.
Yeah, but I
so
think
much
now
death.
it's becoming less and less of a political issue now, and becoming more and more, or at least this is partly my view, but less and less of a political issue and more of just a matter of misplaced pride. And that's what I think is feeding a lot of it. It's just this really, really negative feedback loop, right? The angrier everybody gets, like you hear there's this, I can't remember his name. I wish I had known his name. I only read this today. But you hear him talk about how Hunter Biden could have had corpses in his home and they wouldn't have cared.
Yeah.
The idea was prevent Trump from being elected.
Yes, definitely.
And regardless of whether you support Trump or you don't support Trump, or regardless of whether you love him or whether you hate him, regardless of whether you love Republicans or hate Republicans,
Yeah.
or love liberals or hate liberals, it doesn't matter. That's wrong
Yes.
across the board. What are you talking about? He could have had corpses in his home and it wouldn't have mattered. What the hell are you talking about? And this is where I say that's not political. That's just flat out wrong.
Yes, it
That's
is.
humanity going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
That far transcends any kind of political issue or any kind of, call it duality of beliefs or anything that's divisive. That far exceeds the level of importance that I would place on those things, and instead redirects the target to why is that okay?
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. So you're censoring all this other shit of people talking about how COVID vaccines might not be doing what they're supposed to. You're censoring them, but you're not censoring this guy saying Hunter Biden could have had bodies in his closet and it wouldn't have mattered.
That's Joe's son. Yeah.
Like there's something terribly wrong there.
And they just buried those stories, right?
Buried them, man. There was nothing to bury. They didn't talk about them.
Yeah.
They were so busy pointing fingers at anybody who was remotely conservative. Centricism has shifted to the left as well.
Yes.
And that's not by choice. That's only shifted to the left because the left have gone so extreme.
Yeah.
And that bothers me because when centricism was in fact centricism, it kept both sides so much more in line. They were never perfect.
Yes.
I'm way more libertarian. You and I have had this conversation.
Yes.
I'm way more libertarian than I am anything else.
Same here.
But when I look at the philosophical ideologies of the political left and the philosophical ideologies of the political right, there's a lot that I agree with.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that I disagree with. But now it feels there's way more I disagree with on the left because centricism has shifted in that direction.
Yes.
It needs to be brought back in line because both parties need each other when you think about the impact that they can both have. I think what we need to see right now is we need to see gridlock in Washington as far as the U.S. is concerned. And what I mean by gridlock is when no decisions can be made about certain things,
Yes.
they don't fuck anything up. They can't break anything. But it also gives them, most importantly, it gives them time to heal. It gives them time to let go of, now coming full circle to what I said earlier, these aren't political discussions anymore. These aren't political differences. These are differences born in pride.
Yes.
They're born in hate. They're born in envy. They're born in anger. The most negative of emotions that humans can feel.
What's the new bill that they just passed in the States? The
This is the Inflation Reduction Act.
Inflation Reduction Act. And they're printing another
What a piece of shit bill.
80 billion.
It's so stupid. In fact, I think it's only going to serve to further amplify the inflationary issues that we're seeing. There's no other way that this can go. and you follow the money and you take a look at the way that things are going and you just sit there and you look at what's in this bill and you say, you guys are idiots. You guys are absolute idiots. They need to introduce, I don't remember what the term was. It's, I'm guessing it's just term limits.
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi she needed to be gone. That crypt creeper needed to be gone long ago.
How long has she been there?
Way too long.
40 years?
Something like that. It's disgusting.
And she's worth a few $100 million.
Makes no sense.
I mean, there's a lot of insider trading going on there.
Oh,
that's for sure.
It's blatantly obvious, man. It's blatantly obvious. You
It
sit there,
is.
and the crazy part is that there were Twitter accounts that were
tracking her
they were
trades.
just tracking her trades, and like if you followed her trades, you made money.
Yeah.
I made money following her trades at one point because I just didn't believe it.
She's got the inside.
It was like we're
inside
talking.
Scoop.
I did it with a negligible amount of cash, kind of thing, because I was just curious. I was like, "There's no way this is legit." This was when I didn't have quite as clear and quite as I think complete a view on what I have now. And this isn't to say that I know it all, but I feel much more confident in my conviction of it now than I did even before.
Yeah.
And part of that conviction came from me just researching this and doing doing the due diligence on my own.
And then they censored that account.
Yeah,
Because
it
it
wasn't
was-
just censored. It was like it was suspended.
It was nuked.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
nuked the shit out of it.
They nuked Unity Movement, which is a third party that was starting to gather up some steam.
Yeah,
I think it was started by a biologist, Brett Weinstein.
the worst part is that it was someone of very credible
Respectable.
stature.
Yeah, of
Right?
course. Yeah.
Those opinions are opinions you should be listening to, not
Yes.
censoring, not muting.
They just, they nuked his account. Today, the libs of TikTok was banned.
Suspended on Facebook, I think, right?
Suspended off Facebook.
For no reason.
Steven Crowder was removed off of YouTube.
Yep.
So, I mean, there is a total hunt for
It seems
any...
like Rogan might be the only one who, right now, I don't think they can really deplatform because of just the size of the audience.
Well, I mean, he's got an exclusivity deal with Spotify,
Yeah.
right? So you've got...
Spotify's caught between a rock and a hard place.
Well, I mean, their stock went up by, 80... Well, I don't remember. I'm not even going to quote any numbers. But when he signed on, like, their company skyrocketed to
Yeah.
another level. So
Rightfully so.
yes.
Very rightfully so. And that's
Yeah.
why I say they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
He's great at listening to both sides of the argument.
It's very objective.
Yes, and that's why I like listening to him.
Mm-hmm.
Right, he's a good insight on everything that's right, left,
That and
political parties.
he's also just a sharp guy.
Yeah,
So it's not just the objectivity that he brings to a particular discussion, but the way with which he disseminates the information that he is fed and then outputs it in such a way that I think an audience appreciates, or not an audience, but the audience
Big
appreciates.
time.
That's what I think keeps people coming back.
and when he was talking about different treatments for COVID, he mentioned ivermectin
Yep.
and hydroxychloroquine.
There's also like just vitamin D or something.
Yeah, just vitamin D, and also being fit.
Yeah.
That's when the traditional media came after him hard.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
There was a whole episode. He went through. They tried to put him through the ringer for that
They tried, yeah, but it didn't work.
because he didn't care.
It only made him more popular
Yep.
in the end. So I mean,
I also think
good
it's
for him.
because he wasn't reactive to it the way that I think they wanted him to be.
yeah,
And this isn't to say that he didn't address it, but he addressed it the way that the audience, I think, has come to respect him
Yeah.
addressing certain things. So there was a consistency at a time where nothing was consistent.
yeah,
So I think that was something that led to an even further appreciation of his platform, a further appreciation of the Joe Rogan experience, a further appreciation of just that philosophy set. Critical thinking is a lost art, which is really unfortunate. But this remained a beacon of hope in that, in that dire sort of lack of critical thinking.
There's a lot of people that wouldn't even want to be on this podcast right now talking about these issues because they'd be so afraid of the criticism
Right.
that will come back. And I'm sure I'll get some. I'm sure.
Who cares?
I don't care.
You're going to get criticized whether you do it or whether you don't.
No, I mean, you can put a little angry
Emoji.
emoji there on this post wherever you see it.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for the boosting the algorithm. That's
course.
great. But I mean, people are so afraid to even speak up these days. During the Freedom Convoy, I had friends that were like, "Man, I wish I could go. I wish I could go show my support, but it's not good for my business."
Right.
And it's like, listen, you got to stand up for what you believe in.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if this continues going on the way it was going on, I mean, you might not have a business 3-4 months from now.
Yeah.
And did you end up going to the Freedom Convoy?
I was unable to.
No.
No, I had a lot of friends who went. I sent my love, and I send my love publicly now.
Yeah.
100% supported it.
Yeah.
And all this bullshit of, oh, they found weapons and this and that. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, give me a break. What are you talking about?
Yes.
And people arguing and complaining and saying, oh, it was violent, it was rowdy, it was this, it was that. The pass that I'll give is I understand sometimes people were complaining about noise and things like that. Fine.
Yes, of course.
But I look at it and I say, where was your voice complaining about the liberties that we were watching get put through the ringer, like just get tossed out?
Yeah.
Where was your voice then? You're going to complain about this instead of that?
And it was so disappointing to see the Labour Party, the NDP, just shit over all of these truckers. And they're supposed to represent
the working class.
Laborers.
Yeah.
Right? And saying things like, you've made your point, go home. Okay, but these guys don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you want them to go home to what?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I supported them 100%. I mean, yeah.
Now we're seeing it happen in other places as well, right?
It's happening in the Netherlands
The
right
Netherlands
now.
that one's serious too. I mean, not to remove any validity or to discount, the movement that had happened here and that continues to happen here, but rather just to say that was not something that I would have expected. And I don't know why it didn't kind of strike me as that, but when I saw it, it made me really happy. Mm-hmm. And it's partially because...
The farmers?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's partially because they're standing up. Yeah, man, that's it.
So we have to talk about the WEF.
Oh, my God.
We have to talk about the World Economic Forum.
I gotta say, I used to be a really, really avid Marvel fan.
Yeah.
And I say that word in a very calculated manner. I used to be. I don't support anything Disney anymore. And the reason that I'm bringing them up is because anybody out there who's a fellow geek will recognize Hydra. As far as I'm concerned, the WEF is Hydra. That's it. There's no discussion needed. The World Economic Forum is not about the world. They're not about the economy, and they're not a forum. Period. They're lying across the board on every single one of these words that they're using in their name. Mm-hmm. Klaus, Gates, all of them. Yeah. They are the single biggest threat to humanity.
They're about control.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it. That's all it is. It's all about control. It's all about removing freedoms. It's all about govern me harder, daddy. Like, that's all it is for them. Mm-hmm. They could not care less about the climate. They could not care less about getting people healthy with the COVID vaccines. They don't care about any of this shit.
No.
Follow the money.
Yes.
We are a population of, less than 40 million here in Canada. Why did Trudeau buy 550 million doses?
Yeah.
Do the math. We saw the writing on the wall long before a lot of this shit came down the pipeline.
So I had a lot of people when I started raising red flags and saying, listen, I'm not sure about this shot. Like, I don't think I want it. And then, their answers would be like, then why is everybody throughout the world taking it?
Right.
Is this some type of organized, black ops plan or,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just money for them, to be quite honest.
It is.
I mean, the everything's coming out. I mean, we lost 6 doctors
in 1 week, yeah,
in Toronto, and this is after their 4th dose. Mm-hmm. And I dug a bit deeper, and I wanted to make sure that I got the right information here. So I've got their names. There's 6 doctors that passed away. Dr. Hannah. She was. Dr. Hannah, Paul Hannah, 50 years old. Dr. Lauren Siegel, 49 years old. Dr. Stephen McKenzie, I don't have the age here. Dr. Sawicki died July 22nd. He was in his 40s. Dr. Naiman, 27 years old. And what do we have here? Another one that was not in Toronto. This one is in Saskatchewan. Dr. Mazluman, 44 years old. So I looked and I saw, okay, what's going on here? Why did they pass away, mm-hmm. right? The first one was battling a case of... So Sawicki was facing gastric cancer for 4 years, right? Okay. Dr. Hannum, 40 years old, just sudden cardiac arrest. No prior notice, no nothing.
Otherwise
Naaman,
healthy?
Otherwise
In
healthy.
terms of just even when you look at, not to be overly judgmental, but when you look at the person's picture, do they look relatively
I've
healthy?
only got names here.
Oh, okay.
Candace Naaman, 27 years old, collapsed while swimming as she competed in a triathlon.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you got to take some and you got to leave some, but people shouldn't just be dropping dead.
Especially, there are also,
Triathletes, yeah.
I was going to say, there are also athletes who are in far better shape than you and I will ever be.
Yeah.
And they are young. They are otherwise, even just not just from an athletic perspective, but they're healthier than we will be, even just from a dietary regime.
Yes.
And for them to just be collapsing is terrifying.
And Mazluman, 44 years old, just died suddenly in his swimming pool.
Jeez.
No illness. We don't know. So anyways, I just wanted to put it out there. Some of these doctors were facing other conditions, but some of them were young, healthy, would not expect them to die, and then paf, they're just gone.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's ask these questions. Is it okay to ask these questions? Like, I mean, it seems like it should have been asked.
It's okay, but everybody on the left is gonna try to censor it.
Yes,
and I think some of that's coming from, I touched on this earlier, but pride. I would rather stand in front of a room of 1,000 people and talk about my failures, than talk to a room of way more about my wins.
Yeah,
or it's the other way around. You got what I mean.
yes,
The reason that I'm kind of bringing this up is, if you've got the shot, if you're somebody who was for the shot, got the shot, and now you're seeing all this information, and for whatever reason you are blindly accepting everything without questioning anything, I think you're doing yourself, your family, your friends, everybody that you know, love, and care about, you're doing all of them, including yourself, a disservice.
Yeah.
To a criminal degree.
100%.
Because to not ask these questions after you have injected something into your body is showing publicly a complete disregard for your own well-being.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And again, if you want to get the shots, get the shots. For all I care. Get the shots. Do what you feel is right. And if that's what you feel is right, and you're able to give me a why, I'll respect your decision.
Yeah.
But if you cannot give me a why, if your why is because Trudeau told me to, I know you are also publicly declaring to me that I know I never have to take anything that you say seriously, because you don't have any conviction in it yourself.
Yeah, you're not thinking for yourself.
Yeah, you and I have chatted about this before, but I've said to people multiple times, friends of mine, family, people that I've coached, people that I've worked with, I've said, if you can't speak to me with conviction, don't speak to me at all. And the idea isn't to be a hard ass or to put up a barrier to the communication, but rather to inflame them to their potential of speaking from a place where you're not just confident in what you're saying,
Yes.
but you've put the work into understanding what you're saying well enough that you can convey it and communicate it effectively.
Yes.
If you can't do that, then what are you doing?
Do you think that we're lacking critical thinking skills in our education system?
No, I think there's an abundance of laziness.
So people are just like, okay, what's easy? This is the decision that the group's making, so I'm just going to follow this.
There's the real pandemic, and I think the real pandemic and real epidemic is complacency. And critical thinking, I said it a few minutes back. I said it's a lost art, but regardless of whether it's a lost art or it's just something that right now is on a little bit of a breather,
Yeah.
it's not gone. It's something that needs to be celebrated. And unfortunately, right now, similar to the example you brought up a little bit earlier, right? You were saying you had some colleagues, business owners, who said, "I want to go, but I think the optics are going to look bad for my business." Fuck the optics. There's no other way to put it. Like, the optics are part of the narrative. The optics are created because there's an illusion that they're trying to build. And I say illusion. It is a narrative. It's not an illusion. We're seeing it.
Yeah.
So I think illusion as a word is the wrong word, but there's a narrative that's being built in front of us. And if you just sit here and you just think critically about, and you just put a little bit more thought than what the government says is right, if you just look at it a little bit more carefully and you decide for yourself what you choose to believe and what you choose to potentially question.
It's so easy to see through it. I mean, there was hundreds of thousands of people there the first weekend.
Yeah.
And you just saw this Confederate flag being reposted
Over and over and
everywhere
over again.
Over and over.
Trudeau's photographer was sitting there taking pictures of that flag,
Yeah,
right?
But that's a Nazi flag, right?
It's ridiculous, man.
That was Trudeau's photographer that was happened to be standing right next to that Nazi flag.
Yeah,
So,
I wonder.
did they send that out? and
Yeah, I think they did.
I think they
And
did also.
people sit here and they talk about like, oh, conspiracy theory, blah blah blah. It's not a conspiracy theory if it comes true. If all of
Exactly.
these things,
100%.
these strings of these events and the strings of these findings are all being
Yes.
validated, not just by the people who are trying to validate them, but by external sources as well.
Yeah.
What do you? Okay, what's next? Go ahead, call it whatever else you want. You know what I mean? We're all
Yeah.
ears.
Yeah.
Try to come up with a why. Try to punch a hole in it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, all it does is just make that particular person who's criticizing it. It makes them look less and less critical.
Yes.
Someone who otherwise probably could have had a very, very credible argument. Someone who could have otherwise potentially shined a little bit more light on something that maybe we were missing.
Yes.
I try to be as mindful as I can about when we are close to a problem, or when we have, think of what I just said about conviction. When you have a very, very high level of conviction, oftentimes that's an easy way to end up strapping yourself with blinders.
Yes.
And then you become an echo chamber.
Yes.
And so it's important to always listen to what's coming from the opposite side. And I don't say the opposite side in terms of almost creating an enemy out of them. I'm saying opposite side just in terms of someone who will challenge what you believe.
Yeah, you can disagree with somebody and still get along, right?
At least that's what I'd like to believe, you know. But unfortunately,
You used to.
we're seeing a lot of this kind of
Yes.
fall through. We're seeing the cracks in the very foundation of our society, and there's no light coming through it. Or if it is, it's the lights of hell.
We have to be we have to be able to have conversations. That's number one, right?
It's the only thing that I think will ever push us forward, not just as a society. So when I think about, micro level Canada, but macro level as humanity, the only thing that will move us forward, the only thing that will push us forward in any kind of a meaningful and sustainable kind of way will be communication.
Yes.
And
Diversity
I know that's
of
easy.
opinion.
Yeah, it's much easier said than done.
Yes.
But I only kind of feel that because of what's happened over the last handful of years. I think, like I said earlier, centricism was to be celebrated. And unfortunately now, if you don't completely agree with everything the left is saying, all of a sudden you're right.
Yes.
Like you're on the right. All of a sudden you are the enemy.
And the opposite is true,
Yeah.
right?
And the right is just pissed off as it is
Yeah.
at the left for everything that they're doing. And I've fallen into both camps myself, and I've tried my best to catch myself when that's happened and then to celebrate what I just said, which is stop, breathe, look at everything, zoom out
Yeah.
as much as you can, zoom out and then zoom out again and zoom out a third time, right?
Yes.
And look at things from as holistic a view as you can so that when it does come time for you to justify your own due diligence, when you are piecing together some of the things that you celebrate within your own within your own ideologies and your philosophies, you can say that you're celebrating them from a place of peace, not a place of anger, hatred, rage, contempt. Those things are poisons.
Yeah.
That's like, when I think about the left right now, I honestly do feel, specifically the extreme left, and I feel the same about the extreme right. It's like they're drinking poison expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, again, we're leaning so heavily towards one side. It's easy to just point fingers at them and say all this cancerous toxicity within humanity
Yeah.
is coming from them. As much as I would love to say that, I know it, intellectually, I know it's not true. Emotionally, though, I feel it, right? I feel that all those things I just said, that anger, that hatred, that contempt, I feel all that.
It's coming from the extreme right and the extreme left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's clashing.
Definitely.
Right? It's, what happens, what's that saying? What happens when an immovable force meets an unshakable object or something? There's this saying like that, right?
Yeah, I've heard that before.
And that's what is kind of happening. There's this massive clash happening in the middle. The problem is that all of the, I'm going to make some people upset saying this, all of us normies are right in the center of that clash.
Yes.
So, we've got this shit show on the left and this shit show on the right, and we're just stuck. Like we have nowhere to look other than to just kind of witness it all unfold.
Like we're witnessing a car crash and we can't look away.
And we can't look away. Yep.
Yeah, that's what's going
It's
on.
a panoramic view, and you've got no choice, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, logic will if you sit down and you really think about it, right? These last 2 years, if you want your business to remain open only for vaccinated people, cool. You do you. That's your business, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, to impose it on the entire population and have this one homogenous, rule for the entire society, it just doesn't work.
But that's
man.
technocrat globalism in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
That's control.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just doesn't work, man. It's not going to work. So, I mean, this last 2 years, I hope they noticed that the experiment failed.
Right.
But I don't think that my wish
See,
will be
here's
a
the thing.
reality. I think they're going to
have
come back.
they have noticed it,
Yeah.
but they can't go back on it now. Like think of what that does
Yeah.
to, we spoke about optics earlier. Think of what that does to the optics, specifically in this case of the Liberal government, Liberal NDP government here in Canada, and then the Dems over in the US.
Yeah.
Think of what it does to them. Think of what it.
They're going to triple down on what didn't work.
Oh my God! Like they have to make it work. And now you look at, for example, Carrie Lake, new governor of Arizona. Now they're calling it Carizona.
Why?
Because she's awesome. she's an awesome Republican.
Did she win?
She won.
Was it a
Clean sweep.
Democrat before?
I don't know if it was a Dem state before. I don't think it was.
Wasn't that the state that Liz Cheney was running in?
No, that was Wyoming.
Okay.
So she got thrown out
Yeah.
of Wyoming.
She's a
Good.
fake.
And now
She's a
she's sitting
fake
here talking about how she wants to run. She wants to go through a presidential elect, like come 2024. Like
Yeah. She was comparing herself to
Abraham Lincoln as
Yeah,
well.
I
Like
saw
pull your head out of your ass. Like you really can't look
Come on,
too far,
lady.
can you? Right?
that. Yeah.
So all of this to say, I look at how the level of delusion is at an all-time high, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not any different. This might be a great segue. Not any different than when you see the level of euphoria in a market, in an equities
Yeah.
market, where it just doesn't make any sense. Makes absolutely no sense. You're seeing these companies with a PE ratio that's through the roof, when something as simple as their current ratio, just their assets versus their liabilities, is dismal. But they're rated at, like, equity markets are I called it, and I don't say this disparagingly towards anybody who's suffering from these conditions, but I call equities markets drunk schizos. Because they wobble and
all
just
over.
left and right, forward, back, diagonally. There's just no rhyme or reason to it.
Let's talk about the market.
Sure.
Obviously, let's segue into that. When we met the first time, we were dealing on a real estate deal.
Yeah.
And you told me that you're a day trader. Is that the right term?
At the time I was trading, I wouldn't ever call myself a trader. I'm not proficient enough to
Okay.
be a trader. I don't understand the technicality behind day trading. I think day trading is a very, very dangerous game, but also a unbelievable skill set that very, very few possess to actually be successful.
Yes.
I'd rather not introduce that kind of volatility into my own trading and into my own, when I say trading, I shouldn't call it trading. I should say into my own practice. I have learned by trial by fire and trial by error.
Yeah.
Across a number of equities. I've built 3 distinct portfolios: tech, genomics, and blockchain.
Okay.
And I've got my ass kicked by all of them in multiple ways, more ways than I think I was ever expecting. But I
Yeah.
celebrate each of those ways as much as I can. When we met, I was trading to some extent, but I was trading less on a technical level and more on a fundamental level,
Okay.
which at the time I kind of learned pretty quickly. It made no sense. Because if I'm trading on a fundamental level, why would I not just invest long-term in this company? If I believe in the fundamentals of a company, why am I trading them?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. There was a clash. I spoke about a clash earlier. There was a clash going on in my head where it was the clash of intellect versus greed. Quite honestly, if I could try to distill it down and boil it down to something that makes a lot of sense, something that I hope is relatable to the audience,
Yeah.
it just really did feel like I was at odds with companies that I believed in versus being driven by the economics of my own financial situation at the time.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous place to be, because for all of the due diligence that I was putting into understanding a company fundamentally, I was throwing all those fundamentals out the window when it came time to justifying why I was investing in them.
Yeah.
And instead I was just saying, I'm going to put X amount of dollars into this particular company for Y amount of time, and I'm going to gain hopefully Z amount of cash and call it.
Were you surprised at what the market did over the past 2 years? The way it went on a bull run?
The aggressive, actually, before I even get into that, where products, I say this, and I think a lot of people, anybody who has spent any amount of time in the equities markets will probably recognize this saying, but you're a product of the market you're born into.
Okay.
And so if you're born into a bear market, you're way more inclined to be a bear, a perma bear.
Yeah.
And if you're born into a bull market, you're way more inclined to be a perma bull, both of which are bad.
And if you're starting a company right now in a bear market, when you say you're perma bear,
Yeah.
you're saying that the odds of success are lower?
A bear market, the philosophy set behind a bear is that they're always waiting for the shoe to drop. They're always looking at it going down.
Yeah.
So a bear swipes down when it attacks, so
Okay.
it's downhill.
Yeah.
A bull swipes up when it attacks, so it's on the up and up.
Ah,
That's kind of the loose philosophy set behind
Yeah.
bear versus bull.
Okay.
And people can have, anybody intellectually capable of looking at a set of numbers, which all of us are, it's just a matter of developing that skill
Yeah.
set. But anybody who looks at, for example, the financial sheets of company A versus company B, they can look at it and they can discern for themselves, okay, here's my bear case for this company, here's my bull case for this company, and here's my extreme bear case and here's my extreme bull case.
Yeah.
And they can justify for themselves whether they would feel comfortable investing and at what level and what degree, how much money, et cetera, et cetera.
What are your thoughts on the future of the Tesla stock?
Tesla's going to the moon, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, I've been full disclosure, I'm a Tesla investor.
Yeah.
I invested in Tesla way later than I would have liked, but way earlier than
I bought
think.
one stock because
One share?
One share.
One share.
Yeah.
Because of me.
It's like 1,000. What is it? 11?
Right now?
1,100?
No, right now it's 900 something.
Ah, shoot.
But did you buy? You bought like relatively recently.
No, it would have been like a year ago.
So then you're probably still in the money. You're good.
Probably. Yeah.
It's gone through a split between then and there's likely another one coming up at some point. I think shareholders voted in favor of the next one.
Okay.
We're looking at I think it was next month or something. Anyway, I don't pay attention to it anymore because when I think about
You just let it ride.
touching on the World Economic Forum, they have their Agenda 2030, right? Part of my Agenda 2030 is holding that stock till 2030. That's my time horizon. I have a 10-year time horizon on Tesla, and for all of the ways that I could have traded it, for all of the volatility that was inherent to that stock just a short time back, there was only a matter of time before it ended up hitting a particular point in the S-curve. If you look at the S-curve of adoption and you apply the S-curve of adoption to, for example, the internet, cell phones,
Yeah.
anything that we've seen a drastic uptake, digital cameras, for example, these mics that we're using,
Yeah.
all of these have differing sort of S-curve levels of adoption.
Okay.
And in Tesla's case in particular, you look at there's a really interesting. I'll boil it down to this example. A really interesting picture from way back in the day. Excuse the lack of knowledge on the timing, but I think it was something like the 1930s, right? And it was, I think, a road in Manhattan. Someone will correct this in the comments or whatever, but it was this main street in Manhattan, I think. And all you see are horses and one carriage, one motorized carriage. And then fast forward, I think it was like whatever it was. Let's just, for the sake of argument, let's just say it was 15 years. You look at the exact same street 15 years later, and it's all motorized carriages and one horse. And that's what I think is happening with this electronic vehicle or electric vehicle
Yes.
adoption.
It's going to be fast.
The crazy thing, though, is that Tesla has such an unassailable lead. All these other companies, when I say all these other companies, I say it intentionally disparagingly
Yeah.
towards the likes of Ford, Toyota, all of them. Partially why I kind of take a jab at them this way is because they're trying to do things differently. Tesla has open patents on everything they do.
Yeah. Just copy me.
Copy them.
Yeah.
They did it. So Tesla's mission statement is to further the development and the acceptance of sustainable energy. That's all it is. Those aren't the exact words, but that's the gist of it. And all these companies who are trying to do something different, I understand why, because it's in their blood, it's in their DNA, to want to just be thinking outside the box and to maintain their own brand and things like that. But I also think, again, coming back to it, pride.
Yeah.
I think they're too attached to that pride.
I saw that the president Joe Biden hosted an EV summit at the White House.
Didn't even invite Tesla.
Did not mention Tesla. It's like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And you could see right through it.
You know what it is, though, right? There's a what is it? It's the oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. The
Is it because Elon's not playing ball with them?
that's a part of it, but the other part of it is the what are they called? Like I think it's union workers or something on the employment side, specifically about like there's an auto union. Again, someone will correct this.
When they bailed them out in 2008, GM and Chrysler, did they buy a portion of those companies?
I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question. All I know is when I think about Tesla had whatever it was like a $500 billion loan,
Yeah.
an environmental loan, and they paid it back in a handful of years, and they hit profitability way quicker than people were expecting.
Yeah.
People think of a
Way
lot of
quicker
people
than
think
Elon expected.
yeah, a lot of people think of Tesla as an automaker. They think of them as an automobile manufacturer.
It's an AI
They're not.
company.
It's an AI company. It's an energy company. It's a storage company. They're a software company before they are anything else. They just happen to also sell cars. And this is where I think a lot of people, their investment thesis is wrong.
They're collecting so much data.
They compare them to the likes of, some of these other automakers, legacy automakers. And it doesn't make any sense. If you want to compare them and you actually want to sit there and you want to put a proper valuation on that company, compare them to the likes of Google, Microsoft, Apple. Compare them to their cohort, not to the cohort of these old timers coming from legacy auto. And this isn't to totally shit on legacy auto, but that's not any different than me saying to you, hey, Marty, What would you rather, farming or whatever software? Like they're so completely
Different.
removed from one another.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bad example, but they're so far removed from one another. I don't understand how people who are trying to attach a particular valuation or to try to understand the PE ratio for Tesla, something as easy as a PE ratio.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at it and attaching a valuation based on how they compare to automakers? It doesn't make sense because they are going to leave automakers in the dust
Yeah.
like they already have. I mentioned a few minutes ago, they have an unassailable lead. It's not any different than, for example, if you have two athletes who are of equal physical condition or who are in equal physical condition and of equal physical
Yeah.
ability. If one has a 30-second lead, the one in second is never going to catch up to that person.
No.
It's going to take several black swan events before that would ever even remotely come close. And even then, whatever that first athlete learns in those black swan events will only further their lead.
Yeah.
And that's the situation that Tesla is in right now.
Good.
I think the energy storage specifically and then the AI on their side is going to propel them forward like we've never seen.
It's good that people like Elon exist, right? When it comes to environmental issues and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that he catches some of the flack that he does, but he also invites some of it.
Yeah.
Not to praise him too much kind of thing. I think he's brilliant, and I think he should be celebrated for what he's accomplished, not only as an entrepreneur, but what he's accomplished as an immigrant specifically. And you can love him or you can hate him, but you can't deny the fact that he's the founder of $6 trillion of six separate $1 trillion companies or something.
PayPal,
PayPal, SpaceX,
Tesla,
or maybe not Space. I don't know if SpaceX falls into this category yet, but Tesla,
Solar City.
the Boring Company, yeah,
That's
the fifth one.
Solar panels.
Yeah,
Right.
but there's a handful. I'm pretty sure it's 6.
It's crazy.
It's nuts, man.
It's crazy.
The amount of
He's doing a lot for the planet, man.
for humanity. Yeah,
And to come back to the point earlier, full circle, he's doing it through capitalism, right?
Yeah.
He's not saving the planet by us paying an extra 11 cents per liter of gas.
yeah,
He's not saving the environment by us paying more taxes to a government that's going to waste that money.
yeah.
Whenever I hear about these initiatives that are put forward by the government to save the environment, I'm not down with that. I'm down with being eco-friendly. I'm down with making better choices, but I don't need to give my money to the government and have them waste it.
They're terrible at capital allocation.
They're horrible at managing things.
Yeah.
You want inefficient things being done, just give money to the government,
Yeah,
right? Let people keep their stuff. When they get everything in order in their lives, if they pay less taxes, they can organize their life in a better way and make better choices for the environment. If you're making it so difficult for people to get by, I was buying groceries yesterday and it was $30 for 4 chicken breasts, right?
which is ridiculous.
Which is crazy. But I mean, if people are up to here in expenses and they can't really get to the ends meet, right?
Yeah,
Then they're not going to be making better choices for the environment. Make sure that your nation is prosperous. Make sure that the people in there are able to support themselves, and they will make better choices for the environment.
yeah.
It's just the way it is. Don't tax them to the point that they can't pay for groceries. Then they won't care about the environment.
Well, at that point, it's a game of survival more so than it is anything else. So I'm either helping the environment survive after I'm dead, or I'm trying to survive now. And that's the unfortunate reality of, I think, the conversation that a lot of people are having with one another, with
Big
their
time.
partners, and even just with themselves.
Big time.
And even now, you look at I can't remember the economic body that did this study. I'll try to find the name and I'll send it to you. You can
Yeah.
throw it into the notes or whatever.
Sure.
But they did this. Just as evaluation of how much income, what the average income spent on servicing mortgage debt is in Canada, and it was something like 46%. It was something crazy,
Oh, wow.
just shy of 50.
I should know this, but I'm
And
not surprised. To
Like
hear
I said,
it's that high.
I'll send it to you. It was 46%, and you look at how that impacts everybody's future who falls in that cohort. Specifically, in this case, I think the middle class immediately falls into that cohort.
Yeah.
But you look at how it impacts all the decisions that they make from a retirement perspective, from an eco-friendly perspective. Even things like when you think of vegan food, for example, even things that are in my mind, they should be easier to produce
Mm-hmm.
because there's less work going into, for example, like when people say like, oh, it's an organic craze kind of thing. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? If it's organic, it came out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Let my watermelon have seeds in it. That's organic.
Yeah.
Doesn't it take less shit to grow it?
Yeah.
Or shouldn't it? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of this stuff that doesn't quite make a lot of sense and just doesn't add up.
No.
And it adds up even less when you place it in the shadow of someone saying, I can't sit here and even pay my bills, let alone pay for another bag because they don't have plastic bags at the grocery store or, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And someone might say it's negligible. It's 5 cents for a bag or whatever. Someone might argue all of these
adds
things.
up.
But it's not the 5 cents that they're concerned with. It's the chicken breast that now, for whatever reason, is 2x the cost that it was a month ago.
It's crazy.
That's the stuff that's really hitting people.
It's crazy.
And it's not going to stop.
No.
I mean, we're going to go, and this is why I think even when you look at the U.S. and how it's a crazy number, but I think it's over 50% don't have any investable assets at all. So now kind of coming back to what we started this on in terms of just talking in investments, that number I think also applies to Canadians.
Mm.
I don't know to what degree, and I don't know exactly how accurate it is, whether it's a one-to-one sort of trade here, but
Very similar.
it must be similar. Yeah.
Very similar.
And that's a crazy, scary
think
thought.
that our countries are different, but they're not that.
We're
different.
cousins.
Yeah.
That's it's as easy as that, and we may
Different
have
in some ways.
yeah
Very similar in some ways.
we have a funny accent, and and some of them have funny accents, but other than that, I mean, we are very, very similar. You go out there, and you're still going to feel like you're at home, regardless of which state you go to and stuff. You're still going to feel, for the most part, you're going to feel like
Of course.
you're home with the
Yeah,
people
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
The location might be different, but everything else will feel very, very familiar.
Let's wrap up with this last subject.
Sure.
Who do you think is going to win the American elections
Oh
in
man,
2 years? Do you
oh
think?
man, that's loaded.
Do you think that Trump is going to run again? Do you think that DeSantis will make a run for it? Do you think they'll run on a ticket together? Do you think?
I'd like to. I never thought I would say this, but I'd like to see Trump take 2024
Yeah.
for one term, followed by DeSantis for 2.
Mm-hmm.
DeSantis, I have a political crush on DeSantis.
Yeah.
Love DeSantis. I love what he stands for. This isn't to say that he's perfect by any means. There's a lot of stuff that he's done and
course.
said that I disagree with.
Yeah.
But largely, he is leading the charge in ridding the world of this nonsense that we've seen happen
Just
over the
a
last.
lot of nonsense.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Trump, I think, is, to some extent, he's the most electable person on the planet. And on the flip side of that coin, he's the most unelectable person on the
Yeah.
planet. And there's people like, I touched on it earlier, but that guy who said it wouldn't have mattered if Hunter had corpses in his closet. This isn't about Hunter. This is about preventing Trump from running.
Yeah.
For him to say that, he's not the only one who feels that way.
No.
And regardless of whether you agree with it or disagree with it, I don't know how you could ever agree with that, but that really adds pressure to Trump being elected and Trump running.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will stop him.
It's funny. I never really liked the guy when he was in office.
Yeah, me neither.
When I was like, man, this guy's a buffoon.
He just talks too much.
He's not diplomatic.
Yeah.
But after seeing what's there now, it's like, oh, maybe he wasn't doing such a bad job after all.
There are countless memes of just him making like a face like this, like a shrugging his shoulders face, and says, "Do you miss me yet?"
Yeah.
And the crazy part is I didn't like him either in office, and as a person, I still don't like him. I think there's a lot, and this isn't to say it's anything personal. It's more just I just don't like his demeanor. I just don't like his approach to things. But as far as what would be best for the nation, he would legitimately be a hell of a lot better than the regime that we're seeing now.
Oh, geez. Yeah, for sure.
We're talking by orders of magnitude, which is
yeah.
just nuts. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But more so than just his impact on, for example, business and things like that, there was a lot of policy that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only, I couldn't get over the grandeur of him and the gratuitous nature with which he just kind of like portrayed himself. I had a really hard time digesting that when he was in office. And the more and more I started looking at his policies, the more and more I started looking at some of the things he was putting through. Don't get me wrong, he didn't get all of it right.
No.
In fact, he got a lot of it wrong, I think. But he did get a lot, like he was pushing for a lot of really, really good shit that would have translated to a meaningful impact in a positive way
Better
on
life.
the lives of everybody, regardless of whether they voted for him or not.
Yeah.
And that's something I can get behind.
Good. And what about Canada? Do you think Polyev is winning in 2 years? What do you think?
I mean, if he keeps going at the rate that he is, yeah.
Yeah.
I would still love. I'm in agreement. You and I have had this conversation before. I would love
Yes.
to see a minority with them and with Maxime.
Having a few seats to put him over the top.
Yeah, and I think Maxime would. The transparency that would come with Maxime and the
Yeah.
transparency that would be required with Maxime would,
Yeah.
I think, to some extent, help correct a lot of the deep, deep-rooted corruption
Yes.
that exists at so many levels within the Canadian government.
I mean, Bernier is doing such a good job of exposing the corruption from the outside.
Yeah,
It's good.
and he's consistent.
He's very consistent.
He's been doing this for the past 2 years.
He has not switched his message once.
It's been the same for 2 years. And I look at that
Let
and I say,
people live.
when was the last time that you saw that out of a politician?
Yeah.
Right?
It's-
Foul creatures, politicians, I tell you.
He did vote for Bill C-16 in Ontario
Mhm.
a few years ago.
Yeah.
That was to make it illegal to misgender somebody.
Yeah.
He has since changed his opinion on that.
But I think it's because he saw how extreme it went.
Yeah. Because anyways, we won't get into that.
Yeah,
'cause
that's a whole other
that's
issue.
another.
That's episode 2, man.
Yeah, it's episode 2. We'll
Yeah.
have to have you back on. for
Looking forward
sure.
to it, man. I would love to.
Does it tell you how long we've been recording for?
It does not, no.
No. Jer? No, we don't know. Let's wrap it up, man.
Sure.
We'll have you back in a few months.
Yeah, I would love to. Would
Okay.
love to. I'm here for a handful of months,
Yeah.
and then because now I'm a resident within Mexico, I don't want to stay out of the country for too long.
Yeah.
I'd like to make sure that I head back when I can, just to maintain the validity of that and not kind of run the risk of having it
Yeah.
revoked.
Of course.
And so I'll head back. My place is built. The condo is done by earliest September of
Okay.
next year. So
Yeah.
I'm a year out. So I figure, unfortunately, I'm going to spend the winter here, but I'm okay with that. I don't mind that.
Yeah,
I'll take
man.
care of business here on the home front.
We'll hang out.
Yeah, and you know about some of the stuff that I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
going on in the pipeline. So
Yes.
I'll settle all of that, take care of all of that, and then head back in, I'm thinking March, do March, April, May, maybe June as well over there.
We'll join you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We'll
I'd
have a
love
little
to.
one on the.
Oh man, I'd love to have you guys out.
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah.
to show you where it is.
Yeah.
And for you to see the progress of the building.
Yeah.
The building is a wild project. It's so cool, man. 16 units, so it's not like it's something massive. But
Do you have a website or anything that people can visit?
Yeah,
if
I mean,
you're-
for the actual project itself, it's called lunapdc.com. That's LUNA letters PDC.com.
Okay.
It's just that's the marketing piece.
Yes.
It is not being advertised
Okay.
right now, partially wise because we've had so much interest from friends and family.
Yes.
That it's mostly staying
Lots
within
of
the
people
family.
are looking to invest in that.
Yeah, and it's not the only building. I mean, there's going to be other buildings and stuff which are already kind of
It's still North
underway.
America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, our outlets are the same. That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's usually our outlets are the same, and we're only 1 hour behind local time here, Eastern.
Yes.
And so a lot of people look for
close
that.
to
but
home.
yeah, it's close to home. It's easy to get to. I mean, Cancun International Airport is a great airport.
4 hours and a bit from
Yeah,
Toronto.
4.5 or so
Yeah,
from
yeah,
Toronto. But the bigger piece is that there's just so much traffic coming into it and going out of it that regardless of whether you are coming from Canada, coming from somewhere else in the U.S., coming from over the pond, doesn't matter.
Cool.
It's really, really easy to get to it.
Yeah. Central.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to get in contact with Kumar, you can always DM me on any of the platforms that you're seeing this. So thank you again.
Thank you kindly for
Appreciate
having
it.
me.
We'll have you back in a few months.
Can't wait, man.
Just hit that button.
Take care.
Ciao.